We want to discuss these key industries now from a global perspective with Marcus Mabry, international business editor of the New York Times, who joins us here once again. So the banking, the auto industry, real estate, they're all in trouble in Europe, in trouble in Asia, and they're in trouble here in the United States. Taking each individually, are there parallels and are there contrasts to what is happening here? And let's start with the banking.
Well, when it comes to banking, this is the sector where, remember, all this kind of began with banking. And it began with subprime, toxic assets in the wallets of American financial institutions. Led to a massive problem, led to weakness in our banking system that still persists to this day. The Obama administration is coming up with nearly $1 trillion plan to try to help that sector. We thought because Asian banks did not have hardly any of this subprime stuff and these toxic assets, they would be spared. We also thought that Europe, because it had fewer of them in its banks, would also be spared. It turns out that the economic problems we're seeing, the collapse of global demand, actually itself has had knock-on effects for banks in both those regions. So for different reasons, they too are in trouble, but not to the extent that we are in the U.S.
All right, let's move on to the auto industry. Today was the deadline for General Motors, for Chrysler to come up with their restructuring plans. Are automakers abroad facing a similar fate, or are the governments of Europe and Asia content to let their automakers deal with the market on their own?
Well, that's a similarity we're seeing. Really, this is the first big test of the age of globalization. It seems no one wants to let their automaker face the wrath of the market alone. It's certainly the case here in the U.S., where Detroit has already been given massive bailout, but it's also the case in countries like France, where the French government has just given billions in low-interest loans to its automakers. So what we're seeing is right now everyone's hurting, and that's because consumers aren't buying. The difference is we think there'll be a market for Toyota, even though they've suffered massive historic losses, once people actually start buying cars again. There is no faith that the same thing will happen to American automakers. So they have a long-term problem that probably is not the same as, for instance, for Japanese automakers.
And finally, let's look at the real estate industry. Many are suggesting that until falling real estate prices are reversed, the U.S. economy will continue to be in recession. Can you say the same for Europe and Asia? We've only got about 30 seconds.
Well, looking at it in 30 seconds or less, I'd say in the U.S., there's a serious problem. Until there's a bottom found, we will probably not even find the bottom of this recession. It's hard to believe people are going to spend money again and help this economy until there's a sense of what our housing value is actually worth in this country. On the other hand, countries like Spain, certainly Ireland, and to some extent China also face similar problems that we do. They had vastly overpriced real estate. It's going to hurt for a long time for them to get into what their values actually should look like. But outside of those, very specific countries, regionally speaking, Europe and Asia, again, do not have the same problems that we do here in the U.S.
Marcus Mabry, thanks very much, as always.
Thank you.